evening.
Good evening.
How's everybody doing this evening?
Good.
I'm glad to see everybody here, especially Sister Louise. She's been out for a while.
Take mama home.
Hope everybody out there in media land is doing well. Pastor, we're waiting for you to come back. But you just take your time to get well.
That's right.
And we'll carry on until you get here.
That's
All right. So, with that being said, I always like to open our service with a prayer. So can someone give us a prayer, please?
Father God, we come down now at the end of another day's journey. We thank you that you send down your blessing upon each of us and you brought us back here together.
Yes, God.
Praying, God, Father God, that whatever said here, that we will use it according to your holy and divine words. We ask you to bless the presenter tonight, you providing us the words of wisdom. We pray that we, like I said, Father God, let us take it to our heart and come to church that you come back looking for without a spot or wrinkle. We ask all these blessings to your holy and divine name for Christ and forever. Amen.
Amen. Well, so last time we talked about developing a team members and leaders. Am I right? And we got almost through the whole chapter. But I'm going to do a little recap. We didn't get a chance to ask the questions, I don't believe. Am I correct? Am I right?
I thought you did.
Did we? Okay. Well, I'm still recap so we know where we're at. I like to make sure that we know which direction we're moving in. So, last time we talked about developing team members and leaders. Tell me something that you remember about that last chapter. Anybody?
Leaders must get the vision.
Leaders must have the vision.
And be able to cast the vision once they buy it.
That's absolutely right.
So that's the key. You got to get them to buy into it.
Buy into the vision. Everybody say buy into the vision.
Buy into the vision.
There you go. Now everybody say 5-star church.
5-star church.
It was interesting before we went on live here, we were just talking about 5-star and we just sang happy birthday to Miss Marie. And it was interesting how the difference in a mediocre happy birthday versus a 5-star happy birthday sound. So, with that being said, I can even see the expression on her face after we changed that to a 5-star. And remember, being a 5-star is not just sometimes, it's something we have to practice on a regular basis.
That's right. That's right.
And basically, when we do have the 5-star act, or when we actually perform 5 stars, it changes the person that's coming.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So if we were to go with that mediocre happy birthday to you, and that's the way sometimes when we go to church, that's the way we act when people are coming to us.
That's right.
But you saw the difference when we changed that to a 5-star happy birthday.
That's right.
And the change. So we have to do that in church on a regular basis because as we know, being 5-star is just not one time. It's a process. It's
That's
a
right.
practice we have
That's
to
right.
do. And I think we went through that with excellence.
Yes, sir.
Am I right?
Yes,
And
sir.
excellence is not just a term or a phrase that happens one time. It is something that is continuously practiced. Correct?
That's right.
Okay. So last in chapter 6, we talked about, again, developing memberships, team members, and leaders. So the first thing, everybody can be a leader, right?
No.
All right. At least I know you was listening. Everybody can't be a leader. Correct? All right. In that, we talked about different quotients. Okay? We talked about IQ, which was the intelligence quotient. We talked about AQ, which everybody thinks is aptitude, but it's attitude, right? We talked about RQ, which is resources, okay? We talked about EQ, and that's not the things I do during church where we go out there and change the sound. All right, so it's not that EQ, but it's energy quotient. And then we have the MQ,
Yeah.
the motivational. Can y'all motivate anyone?
It happened with this song.
You can actually, as of the book, it didn't say that. Persons has to be motivated themselves.
Yeah, you really can't
You
motivate
can't
people.
motivate.
You can
You can encourage them,
You can't-
but you can't motivate anybody.
inspire them.
Okay? They may feel motivated,
That's
but it
right.
still had to come within, right? Okay. And then the last one was the SQ. Anybody remember what that was?
Spiritual.
Spiritual.
Spiritual. Why is that important?
Of your spiritual organization.
Right.
That's right.
Exactly. If you have all those other attributes and never have a spiritual quotient, do you think that's going to work out really well? Okay. But out of all of those, they said the MQ was probably the most important because at that point, you want to be doing it. You're not just doing it because someone asked you to, and therefore, at that point, motivational, you're not just using one talent, you're trying to use all the talents you have because that shows how dedicated you are to the cause. Right? Okay. We also talked about how to not burn out the leader, is always have a co-leader. Correct? Okay. And the other one is a profound statement that says, we must elevate the good of the church over the acceptance of bad leadership. What does that mean to you?
Keeping a person in a position just because, just to feel it.
Okay.
And even sometimes removing the person. Sometimes people have to be removed.
Okay.
And it's a hard thing to do, but for the good of the church, it has to be done.
There you go.
The whole is more important than the one.
Right. That's exactly right. Because the whole thing is we're moving towards that 5-star church. We can't afford to have bad leadership on any ministry hold us down. So it's almost like saying we have all these good ministries, but we have, say, music ministry. Might not be that great. But then you have people out there looking at that may be something that they're really into. That could be actually pulling them back from not actually giving their all. Right? So we can't have one thing holding us back for to hold back the whole project, what we're doing. Okay? You have something, Mr. Cook? You have a question?
Now, some
Okay.
years ago,
Okay.
Reverend Terry King came here and he spoke to the church and he said that, hey, this church, he will not put a person in a position that's not qualified because it will hurt the church. And therefore, it's putting people in wrong position,
There
just
you
to
go.
fill it. And this happens to a lot of churches.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it comes to when you start talking about developing team members and leaders. Making sure that we have the right people in the right place, right? So, we also talk about leaders cannot appropriately alter leadership methods to match the needs of the team. So because as a group changes, the leaders must either adapt to the change or seek out a new team. So what is that saying? As things change, we have to change in order to make sure, not giving up our principles, which were how many principles? How Remember the principles of the basics that we started with? There's a lot of them. Okay, I think it's 14. 14 principles. Yeah, but we do not lose sight of the core principles, right? Okay. So, with that being said, that kind of went back and just hit on a few things that we talked about in chapter 6. So tonight, I want to ask you, how do you think the best way to see exactly how our ministries are doing in the church? The best way. What do you think the best way to see the actual true picture of how we're doing? Right now, how do you think should we do in order to get a true picture?
Evaluation.
Okay.
Yeah, they had the secret worshiper come in.
Okay. So, you think that it's best to get that information from someone who's been in the church to tell you, when you say survey, that's usually how they do surveys.
Yeah.
We tend to survey around the church and they tell us how we're doing, right? Now, all that could be that person's true feelings of how they're doing, but does that give you the true picture of how everything else is doing?
No.
Because if I'm in a band ministry, which I am, and you send that to me, I'm gonna say we're doing great. But I do know that we do have our times when we don't do that well, but you send me a survey, I'm gonna fill that survey out great for you, right? But does that give us a true look at how we're doing here as a church? No.
It's difficult for Corinda to evaluate Corinda objectively. I need somebody to look at me, watch what I'm doing, and tell me, Corinda, you might wanna not do this, and you can, do this a little bit better. And I need to be able to take that constructive criticism and build on my weaknesses or my strengths.
That's good. That's good. I like what you said, the constructive criticism. Some of us have a problem with that.
Sure do.
If somebody says, okay, y'all, you didn't do this right, we become defensive. Right? Right? And therefore, we ignore the actual, maybe the nuggets that they gave us that we could change to make it better, because we feel really some way when someone comes and tells us we're not doing exactly what we think we're doing, right? So when we start talking about the true way of getting it, would you say it's best to get it from somebody that's not attached to us?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we can have blind spots.
Exactly.
Okay, explain that.
We can be too close to something, even though we might know that there is an issue,
Mm-hmm.
we could still be too close to really get a sense and not have biases on what truly is the source of the issue.
Right. And it's easy to happen, because you get into especially a ministry you really love, you ain't gonna let nobody talk about your ministry, right? Go ahead.
So, one question I have though, if I know nothing, and this is just a question, if I know nothing, or I have no background to something, how can I objectively, evaluate something?
Okay.
So like, if I know nothing about, why the deacon ministry does deacon stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I just look at it through some eye, but no background,
Mm-hmm.
can I objectively look at your effectiveness? That's a question I don't know.
That is a good question. And I'm going to basically refer that back to, what are we trying to do? 5-star church? Right. And with the 5-star church, it appears that we are basically trying to see what others think about us, especially new people coming in. So the answer to that question is, do you know how to make a, I don't know, flaming burrito, okay? I know your daughter cooks very well, right? But if we go to a restaurant, do we know how to make all everything on the menu?
No.
But we know what we want to taste.
But we know what we want.
I know what I want to taste like.
But the other thing is, when we leave, we know what the food tastes like. We know what the atmosphere was.
That's right.
We know the service that we received.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when we leave with a certain impression. Okay? So, the answer to that question, no, we would not be able to evaluate all the things that each ministry does. But when someone new comes in, they take away a certain feeling. They remember the experience, right?
Yeah.
They remember, I like that, what has happened. Or they may not know music, but I love the way the choir was singing. I love the word that I got from the pastor. Oh, I felt very comfortable when the ushers came up to me, and after I mentioned my name, they continued to call me by my name. Okay? Those are the things, experiences that we are trying to accomplish as a five-star church. The experience that one gets when they come here. Right? Am I right?
Right.
I just want to make sure I'm on the right thing now, because I could be up here talking and be totally off field, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and that's where we need to be. Right? So the question was, who would we think would be the best way to get that from us? To get the information we need to see how well we're doing. And in this chapter, we find, and you remember the characters, Beth, Jeff, and Gary? In this chapter, Jeff was showing us to get a true evaluation of how well the church ministries are doing. Jeff introduces the concept of secret church shopping. Now, has anybody ever been a secret shopper? I've done that before. I tell you, it's pretty interesting. Tell me a experience that one of y'all may have had as a secret shopper. Who's been a secret shopper before?
Can't think of anything positive.
Okay, but just tell me what was your experience? I mean, how did it happen? How did you come?
I was just asked to volunteer to
Mhm.
be a secret shopper. And as you know, I work in an organization that sells a certain product. And one day it's good, one day it's bad. Do I give them the opinion that I have? Do I give them the opinion I got from that day's experience? That was my issue. And I still have that same issue with surveys today. Sometimes surveys address the specific occasion that you use a product for or the situation for. And then again, they ask you all these broad questions and you can't answer them. So I'm like, Vanessa, how do we address all of this, and how do we find that
Right.
person who can give us a good answer, not just something vague that's gonna
Right.
appease someone?
Well, I can explain. I've actually was a secret shopper back in the '80s. And I know you think that didn't happen back then, but it did. I had to. Well, first thing, they paid me. They do pay you.
That's right.
Okay. And when you're down to money, that's a good thing to do. So they actually gave me the opportunity to be a secret shopper. I was, what they do, they'll call you and say, we need you to go to this store. And this happened to be a Burger King.
Oh, Lord.
Okay?
Have it your way.
And they give you all the different things they want you to look for. But you're going in as a paying customer. Okay? And you go in, and you already know the checklist that you need to be following. You don't carry it with you, of course, because then they know. But you're looking around to see how clean the place is. You're looking around to see how the lighting is. You're looking to see how well the cashier greets you. You go in the bathroom and see how clean the bathroom. But even before you do that, they want you to see, what does the outside look like? What does the parking lot? How are the signages? Is the signages put in the right way, or are there lights out in some of the signages? So those are the things you want you to do, and then once you go through that process, you would collect all that data in your head, and then you would bring it back and put it on paper, and then you would send it to them, and only then do they pay you. But it is an interesting concept because, like you say, some people have bad days. That's not a good day to have a bad day, you know? But that is the concept of a secret shopper. Now, in the book, they did the same thing, but they did it for churches. Okay? So just tell me, what do you think? How do you think that would go over here? Just tell me.
That's one of the things I toyed with when I was reading the book. And they kind of foot stomped it a little bit, whether or not to let the church know they were gonna have a secret shopper come in, and whether or not to tell them. And for they were feared that they were gonna offend the church, that they had somebody looking in on them, or they didn't trust them, or something like that. You know, and I toyed with that a little bit, but I think it's a good idea. First of all, they trained the secret shopper.
That is a thing.
They didn't just send somebody in there, they trained them before they came in. It was someone not affiliated with the church, so it was actually just a churchgoer that came into the church. And I personally think that was a good idea, because it gives you a fresh look at all the ministries, even deaconess, ushers, whatever the case might be, because what they see is what they see.
Right.
You know, they don't have a built-in bias. After you see something for a while, you know, the bad becomes the norm. So they don't have that obstacle. So I thought it was a good idea. The question I had, would we as a church be open to that?
Right.
And I think that if we really want to be a 5-star church, we would say, let's do it. Because you're gonna have secret shoppers when people come in to the church to visit, they just don't come back. They don't tell you why they left.
That's exactly right.
I didn't have secret shop.
And you may have. Go ahead, sir.
Now, listening to what Deacon Martin is saying, it's not whether or not the church membership is all right with it.
There you go.
Leadership.
This is the leadership.
Yeah.
Because if everybody was in on it, it'd be a whole different.
It'd be terrible. You're right. Yeah. And there is a point, it has a title. If everybody knows about it, it's not a secret. Okay?
And you might do well at that time.
There you go. So that is something that we look at, because it is a secret shopper, and I think it's a great idea in order to capture what really goes on in our church. I'm not really worrying about anybody else's church. I'm really capturing what goes on in our church. Okay? As a secret, yes.
Well, maybe I should direct this to.
Now you want to ask a question or something.
Well, I just want to make this comment, but Vanessa would know. When we have visitors that come, and we have a card or something that they fill out, and they turn it in to the church.
Not often.
Okay, then everybody don't do it. I thought that might be a good way. If they're new to the church, first time there, and they fill the card out, and maybe we can send them something
I think that's a wonderful
to
idea
give us
personally.
their feelings.
Okay.
Nobody won't have to know that.
Yeah.
But you may have people like me who have grown up in the church and is a believer and believes that even if I'm not in this house of worship, if I go to, like, so some years ago, I used to travel for work,
Okay.
and I would be gone for months at a time.
Mhm.
I would try to find a church that filled my need for getting to work.
Right.
But I always felt like if I'm going to another church, am I really visitor? Am I a visitor if I'm in the house of the Lord?
No, you're not a visitor to the house of the Lord.
You're a visit to
You're a
that
visitor to
Bible.
that church.
Church before, you a visitor.
That's like, saying that, 'cause we get baptized by two ways. You get baptized by, Christian experience, and then you get baptized by the water. So once as Christian experience, you're in church, you already have the experience of being a Christian. So you're saying going to another church, it's a new church, but you already have the experience of being a Christian. But again, you did say that with those things, it would be a great idea to do that, but we've tried that, right?
We've tried it, it's just, learning to be creative in getting people to respond.
Yes.
That's the
Um,
thing, yeah.
People, you'll say, hey, here's a card, you give it to them. And Jordan did a wonderful job at a QR code that you can scan and the information should come back to Jordan and I, but, for some reason, people aren't apt to just do it when you hand it to them. A 5-star movement would be not just here's a card, but can I get your information and someone help log that information and we'd like to send you something. So
Yes.
especially a church that's a little more intimate like our church, that we maybe take a more intimate approach to people who are
Right.
new to the church or who come and visit our church instead of just putting the onus on them. Now, we've tried that and clearly it doesn't work. So a 5-star movement would be to get the information, but get it from them tangibly and not
Right.
waiting them to send it.
Right. That's good. Yes, sir.
When I was working, we did audits periodically on the job. And we would do an in-house audit and then outside. We would try, first of all, those things that we need to address so that we can pass.
Mm-hmm.
We address those things first before we do the in-house audit.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure that we ourselves have done a good job.
Right.
Then we bring somebody else in. So I think that we need to focus on those things that we could see, we notice that's not right,
Okay.
that can help us to begin this 5-star journey.
Okay.
So we need to point out and be honest and point out these things and work on those things before we bring somebody else shop around and look and I'd rather for them to not send us a bad report. I mean, when I say bad, I'm talking about a bad report.
Because when you was working, right? Well, this is just me. This is just me. And you're talking about when you was working then, or now.
Hey, we put both of them together.
Okay, well, I'll be honest with you. I think getting someone in gives you a more truer picture because a lot of things, we already know what's wrong and we ain't fixed it.
Well, that's
I'm just being honest.
well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, now you think, we're doing a 5-star, we're looking at people coming in for the first time. What do they see? Because we might see things that we're gonna fix, but that may not be the problem.
Yeah, right.
But if you got someone coming in from outside looking and saying, looking at different things and giving the experience of a person that's not going to church or basically coming for the first time, we're trying to figure out what are those things that they need in order, what are some of the things we need to be doing to get people in, okay? As a 5-star church, we need to cover all bases. But yes, if we go and, no, we gotta fix this, we gotta fix that, we know we're not doing that. But then that may not be, the person comes in, may not even be looking at that. You know?
That's right.
So we gotta think about doing it to a point where someone comes in from fresh, looking at different things. And although in the book, they're trained, but then we still wanna know what is looking it through their eyes versus someone who's already a member. Or someone who's already a well-known church goer. Because a person who's a really good church goer, they're gonna come in and they can be critical. Versus just being, you know, saying, hey, this is the way I felt when I got here. Where somebody, because we don't want someone in there just to criticize everything, highly critical. We want someone to give you a true picture, okay?
Well,
And,
you have those who are gonna be critical regardless
oh yeah,
of what,
mm-hmm,
and I know some,
mm-hmm,
that's, really sets up in the sanctuary, every Sunday, you know, are critical, you know, so people are just gonna have that way.
yeah,
But still, it doesn't take away the fact that we stop, you know, doing what we're supposed to do.
that's right.
You know, I like the scripture, Matthew 5:16. Let your light
Mm-hmm.
shine. You know, that's each of us.
Yeah.
We're supposed to let our light shine, that others, wherever they come from, see our good works.
Yeah,
You know, somebody gonna watch you. You know, I watch Nessa. I know where she do.
Oh, she do.
That's what,
You know what I'm saying? Somebody got their eyes on you.
yeah,
right,
You know, they come in here, they heard this and that and the other. And they just come for that, like you said. They come to visit, but, you know, they're secret servants coming in to watch, to see what you're doing. Before they make a decision to join your church.
exactly. Yeah.
So, I kinda struggle as well on this particular model, and I'll tell you why. If I send someone, or if I go to another church, what I am going to see actually is the final product of a worship service. I don't see ministry. If I go into your church service, if I send Patrice or Jordan or someone over to a worship service, they will see the organism of the worship service.
Right.
You'll never see the phone calls that Patrick's making to Sister such and such, or that Deacon Martin is going to visit 25 people. You'll never see that. However, what is important is, I'll use the accounting term, internal and external audit, where the deacons themselves may say, let's look at and I'm using the deacons tonight only because Keith up there being funny tonight, but, you know, the deacons themselves can look at it at themselves, and that's internal. But then what we call here, Papa, the executive council, is the external auditor of it, and they can look at how things work. So bringing in a person who knows nothing will only see a snapshot. Now, granted, it will say, did the band practice and is the choir on point? Is the pastor good? But will it see the ministry of the church? It may see an usher board, but will it see the outreach that David and them are here 2 days a week for hours and hours on end? They won't see it. So
Right.
the secret shopper, sending in a secret worshiper, if you will only see that piece.
right.
They
Right.
won't see the organism that makes up this thing called church.
Right. And they're not supposed to.
No.
They're not supposed to. Because if you're on the first impression, and remember, this is the first impression.
Yeah.
Sure.
This is somebody coming in for the first time. Okay, and I'm not talking about the secret shop, I'm just talking about
That's
someone
right.
coming to our church.
What do they
For
see
the
our
first
worship
time.
look like?
Exactly.
Our church.
I mean,
look
you
like.
know, so the first time, they're going to be looking at they're going to be getting an experience to whether I need to come back or not.
That's right.
Right.
I think that starts at the door.
Exactly.
That's-
But that's part of,
Because if you don't get it there, you, all the rest
Yeah.
of what you're doing doesn't
Right.
matter to you.
So-
Exactly.
So the question was posed, and I believe that this is coming from Pastor.
Mhm.
It says, what are we saying about our church? What are people saying about our church when they walk into our church?
that's exactly what that's what happens, the first impression.
That's right.
They're going to say something, so are they gonna say, hey, I like that church, I think I'm gonna go back next Sunday? Or are they gonna say, hey, you know, when I walked in,
They greeted
nobody
me.
didn't even greet me,
That's right.
you know, and walked in and then I had to find my own seat, or, you know, and this is something I hear, not in our church, but I've heard a lot of times in other churches.
Yeah.
Oh, they act so bougie.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I heard that in other churches.
Yeah, I heard that too.
You heard that church, but that's the first impression that people get. Not here, because I haven't heard that here, but I've heard that in other churches.
Yeah.
You know, and actually they would title different churches certain churches.
Yep.
That's
You know,
true.
they would say, well, that's the bougie church over there. Or, you know, or they're about gone, they're about dead over here, or whatever. And that's what their first impression is. But in order to understand what our first impression is, we have to do a little homework. We have to gather data. Okay? We've tried to gather data through surveying. We've tried to gather through other ways of getting it. Okay? But what's one thing that we may have not tried? Somebody come in as a first time and tell us what they see. Now, granted, they would have to be trained on how to do that. Okay? Because, you know, we want to make sure they know what they're looking for. But I think with that being said, it would help to know, and again, with this, although we target everybody, we want to make sure that we are basically using a shopper that we would target out in the community. The people that we're trying to attract.
That's right.
Right? So we're using that type of person to come in because that information is valuable. Okay? We can do all the surveys we want, but as you know, surveys can be manipulated, it can be changed, it can be made to look like you want it to look.
Right.
But if you're getting the actual information from the person, okay, then you have a better chance of creating a more five-star church because you have the information you need to show what you need to work on. Yes, sir.
So, who will be the ones, to give them, you said they would be trained. So if they would be trained, where would they get the questionnaire from?
Well, this would be something that would be determined by the senior boards and stuff, you know, by the executive. Okay, but just think about it. You wanna make sure somebody's coming in to really give you a fair look at everything and understand what they're looking at. But it's the ideal of, I'm young, I'm coming in, what am I looking for? Okay? And if that's what we're trying to attract, you know, we wanna make sure, just like if we were a Hispanic church, okay? We would want to use someone that's Hispanic to come in, so we're gonna try to use those that we're trying to attract to come in. One of the things, how do we start this? Okay, gotta hire someone to come in and give you a feedback on their first impression. And that's the whole thing, their first impression. Because no matter how many programs you have, how many things that, you know, we get our name out, it still comes out to what other people see on their first impression. Right? And yes, we do a lot of ministries. But again, when they come in, it's the first impression they see. Because unless they are accepted or feel good about that first impression, those other ministries, they're not even gonna look at.
I have something,
Don't you know? Be quiet. I thought we could go by.
Sister Sullivan said that the first, it was the first impression that they would see would be at the door.
Or really the parking lot.
Talk about
There you go.
your
Yeah.
If I
ground.
got out of the car,
Ground.
somebody don't look familiar to me, good morning, team.
What I wanted to ask was, what was the second impression once they get through that door? What is the second impression?
And that's a good question, because that's where you're gonna need to ask them to find out what was their second impression.
You greeted and everything.
Does anybody know what our rating is right now?
What?
What is Poplar Springs?
In the five different stars?
In the Google world, what is Poplar's rating right now?
Yeah.
Three.
What?
Oh, no,
Three.
heck no.
Three?
No, it's actually
I mean, is it on a rate of what?
on a 5-star. You
Oh,
know, how
five,
you
okay.
go on Google
Yeah,
and it's a
yeah.
5-star.
Okay.
Google's
Yeah.
5-star. We're at 4.9. And but it goes back to the point about the survey. You gotta consider the source. If you go in and find and read the 2 non-5 stars we got, there's a story behind them,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, there's a
Yeah, there's always a
one's
reason.
obvious. We would quickly know it if I even alluded to it. But one person who didn't put a 5-star, you know the story behind it. So to an outsider looking in, we look great. But if you dive in and you see these two people, they put a not so kind message about us. But overall, we're at 4.9.
Good.
Going back to 2016.
That's good. Go back to 2016. That's great.
If you go to Google Poplar Springs and look at our reviews,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see
So,
we're
let me
4.9.
ask everyone, with that being said, do you feel that all your ministries are at that rate right now? Because if that was the case, we wouldn't really have to be doing this, would we? And granted, I think we do great, but I think there's always room for improvement. And in order to improve, we have to come up with different types of methods in order to improve.
That's right.
And this just happened to be one that we can make a major improvement on, to where if we're doing 4.9 there and everybody don't necessarily feel that they're at that point, what happens when they do feel that they're at that point? Can you imagine what it would be where you intentionally
Yeah.
are looking to do 5-point star work? Where you feeling now, hey, I'm going to church and today I'm going to do everything in a 5-star manner.
That's right.
Okay?
That's what it's all about anyway. Each individual supposed to be feeling that way.
That's right.
In order to make the church be 5-star.
Exactly. And again, with that being said, each individual has to see the vision. And no matter what, you're gonna have some that's always going to, hey, well, we can't do this, it's not gonna work this way, but we're gonna have to overlook that and go to, basically, we're going to have to look at the project as a
That's
whole,
right.
okay, and ignore bad leadership, right?
Ignore bad leadership
Well,
or
we have to.
remove.
I'm trying to.
But see, but that's
But you're absolutely right.
but to that point, is that not what hinders many churches from being 5-star, when you ignore bad
Exactly.
leadership instead of enhancing
changes.
leadership?
Yeah. So, going back to what it says, how do we get to that point? First, I's the one that comes in and gives us feedback on their first impression. Remember, everything we're talking about is first impressions, right? Okay. Beware of newcomers. Beware of what newcomers are seeing and feeling, okay? You gotta understand what they are seeing, because everything, I'm gonna be honest with you, this is not an easy task. This can hurt.
Yeah.
This can hurt. But anytime, in order for you to heal, you gotta hurt sometime.
That's right.
Okay, so this can be, I mean, cause it's gonna be straightforward. It needs to answer initially 3 questions. Who fits the profile or type of the person we are trying to attract? Since our goal is to attract an unchurched, we wanna find someone outside of our church, but who reflects spiritual, remember that, SQ. Spiritual and social demographics of our target market. And it basically says if you're a young church, you find young adults. If you're a Hispanic congregation, you hire a Hispanic shopper. And next question would be, where do you find these shoppers? What do you think? Where do you think you find these shoppers? Or some examples of where you might find some shoppers?
You go to other churches, similar
Okay.
churches.
Sister churches, maybe, yes. What else?
Community.
Community. Aren't we trying to get people to come in anyway?
No.
Hmm?
You know, that was a time where the church was a replica of the community, but I think it changed sometime because of the dynamics where the community is no longer like it used to be, you know, some 50 years ago. So, and then the question I was reading in the book that said when a person first comes to the church, they do an analysis of what they see, and then they'll come back the second time, and they say, oh, I like that. If they come back the third time, 90%, they say, this is where I want, because I feel this is the church that can meet my particular needs. And the thing about it is that we have people in various churches that have skills, but we never tap those individuals who have those skills. They're left just sitting there, you know?
Okay. Going back to your third time you come in, third time. That's the problem. Because we don't always get them 3 times.
No.
Right. So far as tapping in their skills not gonna matter until we get them in.
That's right.
So, I'm just saying, the problem is, we're trying to get them to that third point. And the only way to get them third point is that first point,
That's true, yeah.
right?
That's facts.
Cause you're not gonna get to the third if you don't like the first.
Right.
So, again, but yes, you're absolutely right. We do need to make sure that they get to the third point, because I remember reading that too. They said once they get to the third point, 9 times out of 10, they're going to make that their home. And that's our job, to make sure that they make that their home. But not only to make it their home, we need to make sure that we're doing the things we need to do to have, when they make it their home, they're going to continue to enjoy their home. How many people go to churches and made it their home, but they don't really like it, or they leave?
That's the back door of church.
I wanna ask the person a question in here, and I direct my question to David. No. Listen,
Okay.
because David hadn't always been a member here.
Right.
And, how were your, situation when you first came? I know you told me about another church.
Yeah.
When you left Mountain View, but how was your impression when you first came
That's a
here?
good question.
Well,
That's a very good question.
when I left Mountain View, we went looking, we were shopping. And we went to this one particular church, and I will not call the church name. And when we went to this church, the first thing that we heard, well, I heard, his birthday was just last week, and this week is Christmas coming up, and now he want money, and he walking around here with them rings on his finger. And I'm saying, wow. And then he got him a nice ride.
Yeah.
And you know, so I'm listening now. I said, oh, wow.
They were the
So-
spiritual quotient.
So I was talking to the Sunday school ministry. You know, let's go over here, and you got a bus right there. You had 2 buses to run. Let's go over here to pick up these children over here in this neighborhood over here, and we bring them to church here, and we feed them breakfast, cause you got to meet their needs first. Get them some breakfast, and then, you know, we can get them in church. Well, who gonna buy the food? Now, we're talking about brothers now.
Yeah.
And I said, well, you can get a big bag of grits about $2 and a couple of dozen of eggs, you good.
Yeah.
Who gonna pay for that? We're gonna get that out of the church treasury. So, you know,
Well, question is,
it wasn't this church that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the one before I
Well, I
got
think
here.
you should go around the world.
but to a newer person,
So
I think he's-
I'm letting
he's
you
the
know
newest
that we had to transition from that church to this one.
we appreciate it.
So the reason why we come here, because we didn't hear all of that. And we was accepted well, because Pastor Brown, he said that, he thought that I was already a deacon, which I wasn't. And the way he approached me, and he made me feel like that I was wanted here.
My question was to a person that's in the recent church, cause David been here for 48 years. Like to a recent person, I think the newest person in the room is probably Minister Howard.
Okay.
Like, what did he see in today's Poplar Spring?
All right, so the first thing that I saw when I came here, when Tamika and I came here, was someone greeted us at the door. You know, that's first and foremost.
That's right.
We visited different churches. We got here in 2022. Yeah. And I got here in February. She was still living in Georgia, but she'll come up and we'll visit churches and things of that nature. A lot of churches that we went to did not even greet us at the door. And I thought that was very, very strange, because churches I've been to in Georgia, wherever I've lived at, there was always a greeter at the door. But not many of the churches that we visited greeted us at the door. So we thought that's kind of strange, right? And so when we got here, there was someone greeted us at the door, you know, and then when we came up, you know, into the sanctuary, ushers greeted us, you know, how you doing, blah, 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 welcome, made us feel comfortable. Service was awesome, you know, music service was awesome, things of that nature there. And then we got a chance to speak to Pastor. And Pastor made us feel like we belonged, right when we first spoke with him. You know, and then come to find out that we had some things in common. You know, he knew, you know, everybody knows I'm from Buffalo, New York. And the church I grew up in was St. John Baptist Church. And at that time, when I was growing up, our pastor was Pastor Bennett W. Smith. For those who don't know who Bennett Smith is, Google Watch Them Dogs. That was his famous sermon. You know, and so that's my pastor. And so we talked about him. So he knew all about him and things of that nature there. So he made us feel really, really comfortable. And we were excited. So we decided to come back the following week, and we did, and same thing. Someone greeted us at the door. You know, when Pastor came up, he greeted us. You know, so we're like, okay, this is home.
Yeah.
You know, this
So
is
it
home.
took you 2 times.
It took me 2 times, yeah. Oh yeah, it took 2 times. Oh yeah, for
Making
me.
sure that it was not just a fluke the first time.
Right. And see, the thing with me is, you know, I've been in the church, grew up in the church, so I've been in church for years, right? So one of the things I do is not only do I go to the service, but I like to go to like the Sunday school and the Bible study to see how those, you know, entities are. You know, are they strong? Are they not strong?
Right.
And that would give me a determination, because service would be great, right? But if you don't have a strong Bible study, then what's the point? You know what I mean? Or a strong Sunday school. So, yeah, but my experience overall was excellent when we came here, and that's why we joined here as well, so.
I've told this story a few times. We were new to the area, and this was, we were taking care of my mother-in-law at the time, and she was in a wheelchair. So we went to another church that's much closer to the house. Not that this is far away, but it's closer to the house. And we would get there, and it was like an inconvenience for them to help us get in and get a seat. And I'm like, okay. Like, well, maybe it's a one-time thing, so we go back again, it's close to the house, like, so every time, it was like we were bothering them by having to have a place for somebody in the wheelchair to go. And our first visit here, I think it was, I don't know if it was Youth Sunday or the youth were just ushering that Sunday, and I remember the child to this day, she's grown with her own kid now, smiled, and she was like, okay, hold on, I'm gonna find somewhere, do you wanna go up front? And it was the child that was like, okay, we'll find a seat. So I'm like, okay, somebody raised her right, let's try this again. So we would come back, and it was never an issue of, we were an inconvenience because we had somebody in a wheelchair that needed help getting into a seat. And you know, we were still visiting, and then, you know, my daughter was like, okay, what are we waiting on to join? You know, it's like, okay, so she's comfortable, I'm comfortable, you know, I'm coming from a very Southern Baptist upbringing, then going to what would be considered a mega church versus Hassan, who grew up A&E, very small country church, to trying to combine and find a place that was good for the both of us. And this was it. It was not us being an inconvenience. It was, you know, getting the music as something that I needed, getting something for Destiny as a child that she needed. And so that's where it was.
That's great. That's great. And that's what it is. And that's why I said, when we start talking about a 5-star, you can't just be a 5-star one place. You gotta be 5-star all over, because if that other for getting it for the kids, if that wasn't right, that would have been, you know, a no-sell there, right?
Right.
So it has to be all over. That's why we all, as every ministry, has to go to the point to where they're making sure that they are 5-star, because what you're looking for may not be what somebody else is looking for. But it's here. We just gotta make sure that it's appealing to everyone and at a 5-star level, right? Okay. Any other questions?
Question. You know, I'm kind of picking out what David said. He didn't call it church, but what he saw in terms of the pastor and what they had on this ring and the kind of car he was driving. That reminds me of, I was reading this some time ago where the PEW, they did a research of all the churches. They came up with the problem was the church was based on money and power. And this was the problem. When they did their research, I read about it. They said money and power was the problem in the church. And then it brought back what Dave was saying, you know, the pastor driving a nice car, got to have he got to have a nice house. And this is what's happening now.
Well, I mean, it may be in some places.
Yeah.
But, you know, right now, we are looking to focus on making sure that when somebody comes in, they're gonna have an experience of a lifetime. That they're gonna wanna come back. That everyone they meet, they're gonna be felt accepted to everyone. That they're going to have that 5-star experience. To not only come back, but to bring others. And therefore, we have to do the work to make sure. And in this chapter, this was one of the methods that we can use in order to get to that, getting a first-hand feedback from a secret shopper that can tell us exactly some of the things that we need to work on, or tell us some of the things that we may feel that we are deficient in, but we're actually pretty good in. Okay?
You know what I gotta say?
Yes, sir.
But we gather all of this, and it's good. I think, you know, that's a great thing, you know, wanna be our best. You know, when we have a secret shopper, a visitor, but what about Jesus? I said that.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
What about him?
Yeah.
There's some churches he won't visit.
You're right.
Tell the people, sir.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I wanna be
You're right. You're right. Some churches want to
we wanna build ourselves, and what said, let your light shine. You want people to see your good works. But when he comes, you know, he said this scripture that, you know, I'm coming back looking for a church
Without spot or
without a
wrinkle.
spot or wrinkle.
Tell
Right.
people.
Didn't I say that, Deacon?
Yes,
He
sir.
said that, without a spot or wrinkles.
Exactly.
We have work to do, like you say.
Exactly.
You know, we wanna, not only for Christ is the answer, but people as well, they're looking for a worship place. You know, and before my wife passed, she said, well, I wanna go back to Poplar Spring.
My mom.
She said, because they have a great ministry
Right.
there, you know. Well, we wasn't talking 5-star, I don't know if you all was talking 5-star back then, but this is my home.
Right.
I love it. You know, the young lady who just finished talking, she sat behind me the other Sunday. I turned around, looked at her, I said, I want to invite you to Bible study. As if though she don't come. You know, this is where it starts.
You're absolutely right.
But this is where it starts, you know what I'm saying?
That's it, right.
You're gonna do everything in your power to make your church, the best for what God is looking for.
Oh my God.
You know what I'm saying, because, you know, may not be, but I wanna be like Nessa. You know, I wanna be outstanding. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. That is a great place to end up. Because just like Pastor said, he said that he reached back and looked, I want to invite you to Sunday school. I mean, the Bible study. Bible study.
Yeah.
That's what we all need to do.
Yeah.
So next time we come in, we should have at least the rest of these tables full.
That's right.
Right? So when you come back, invite, if it's nobody but one person, to Bible study. I think we're getting some good stuff here.
Oh,
Yes,
I
sir.
think we're getting some good stuff.
Good stuff.
But we don't want to just keep it hidden. We want everybody to hear it. So let's get some people back here. So, thank y'all. And thank you for coming. And we look forward to seeing you next